So in this part of the tutorial, we're going to create a brick wall that assembles, and we're going to use this brick model that I got from, I think it was from TurboSquid, and we'll use a cloner to put it all together. So let's get started. So what I want to do is I want to clone this brick. So let's go to our MoGraph menu and create a cloner. And I'm going to place my brick in the cloner just by dragging and dropping it. Now the type of cloner that I want, so if I select my cloner and go to its mode, the type I want is called a honeycomb cloner, and this creates interlocking clones, which gives us a sort of a brick pattern. Now what I need to do to adjust this is to play around with the size, the width and height of this honeycomb, and I'm also going to change the values here for the width and height, the number of bricks in this. So let's just drag the width in till these bricks are almost closing, and that looks pretty good there. What's that, 160? And let's drag this value down until the bricks are just about together. Somewhere 195 looks about right for me. So that looks good. Now you may have to play around with those values a little bit, because sometimes if sort of stretched out the other way, it can be hard to sort of see how the bricks work together. But they just need a little bit of playing around, and you can get this interlocking pattern working. So that's pretty good. That's my bricks done. Okay, next thing I want to do is let's put a few more bricks in this wall. There we go. And now we want this brick wall to assemble. So I'm going to use a plane effector to pull these bricks apart and then animate a field through it. So first thing I'm going to do, as you can see, my cloner is kind of sitting right in the middle of my 3D world, and I actually want it to just sort of sit on the ground. So let's grab the cloner, grab my move tool, and just move it up in the y-axis, just so that it's sitting on top of the grid. It just makes it a little bit tidier. There we go. Now let's set up a plane effector. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to set up a camera so that I've got sort of a camera shot, and I'm just going to center my brick wall. I'm looking upwards at it slightly, and it's pretty much filling my composition there. And let's go to my create menu, and under cameras, create a camera. So if I tumble away now, there's my camera sitting in space, and I can click on this little wee bracket next to the camera, which will go white, and now I'm inside the camera. So once this is white, if I just tumble around, I'm actually repositioning the camera. Once you've got your camera in the right place, it's really easy to accidentally move it when you're starting to work and to get it all out of place. So quite often, if I've got a static camera that I like the position of, what I'll do is put a protection tag on this camera. So if I select this camera, go to tags, and I can't remember which menu it's under. I'm in Cinema 4D R25, and some of these tags have changed the menus, and I'm looking for, there we go, under rigging tags, protection. There we go. So what this does is it locks the position, rotation, and scale of whatever this object, whatever tag this object is on. So now if I tumble, I can't, nothing's happening here. I'm trying to spin my view around, it's not working. So that is locking the camera in place. Now I can jump out of it. There it is there. And that will just save me from messing my camera position up later on. Okay, so there's my wall. Let's get this assemble system working. So let's select my cloner and go to the MoGraph menu and make a plane effector. Now, as you can see, the clones have all jumped up in the air a little bit. So the default setting for a plane effector is to move all your clones up 100 centimeters in the y-axis. So that's my plane effector there. Now, one thing I'm just going to check, I'm going to select my cloner and just go to its effectors tab and just check that plane effector is there, so it's working properly. If you don't have your cloner selected to start with, this will be not there, and your plane effector won't work. You can just drag it in manually if it's not there. I've also had an issue recently where when I apply effectors, they seem to double up. I get two versions of them in here. I don't know if that's a bug in the latest version of Cinema or if I'm doing something wrong, but I seem to get this quite regularly, that I get two effectors. So I'm got in the habit of just checking that. Anyway, that's all working. So let's select this plane effector, go back to its parameters. Now I want these bricks to be well out of my camera shot. So if I jump back into my camera here and let's drag this Y value way up here. So I want my bricks well out of camera shot, so let's say maybe 2,500 in that value there. And let's jump out of the camera again and just zoom out a little bit. So there we go, there's my brick wall up there. So plane effector is pushing all those clones up in the air. The next thing I want to do now is create a field to animate those falling into place. So in my plane effector, let's go to the Fields tab, and I'm going to create a linear field. So here's my linear field here, and as you can see, if I drag it along this x-axis, the red axis here, all my bricks drop into place. Doesn't look particularly natural. I don't really like the way that these are dropping in, but it's working, so that's a good start. So what I can do with this field is I can reposition it and rotate it wherever I want to. One thing I can also do is if I have a look at the field, if I have it selected here, in the Field tab, we've got a direction for that field. At the moment it's going in the X direction. I can change it to the Y direction, which means that if I drag it upwards on the Y-axis, now I'm sort of building this brick wall from the bottom to the top. So that looks a little bit more natural. I like the way that's assembling a little better. It's still a little bit too linear for me though. I would kind of like a bit more variation or sort of a more organic look to it. So what I can actually do is just grab the rotate tool, and all I'm going to do is click and drag on this blue Z-axis, and I'm just going to rotate it a small amount. It's about 20 degrees, something like that. And now as this field drives on an angle through the bricks, it's assembling them in a much more appealing way. I think that looks a lot nicer. So what's important here is that the position and angle of the of the field is really important as to how it actually assembles all these clones. So what's happening is this field is driving through all these clones, and as it hits the clones, it's turning that effect on or off. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to see if you actually turn the plane effector off for a second, and now you can see here is my field and it's driving through these clones. And as it drives through them and hits them, in this area here between these two icon indicators, that's where that effector gets turned on and off. So let's just turn that back on, and now we get this happening here. Now you can change the speed of how long it takes for these bricks to come down by lengthening this the distance between the plane effector start and end points just by dragging this little dot in the middle. I'm going to leave mine pretty much where it is. I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to keyframe this so that it's actually animated. So what I want to do is just zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to drag this field down until all the bricks are fully assembled up in the air away from my camera shot. So I'm going to make sure I'm at frame 0 on my timeline. I've got my field selected, and I'm going to hit the keyframe button, and that will record a keyframe. There's a little wee dot that appears underneath the playhead there that shows me I've got a keyframe. I'm going to go forward to frame 75, which is 3 seconds for me. I use 25 frames a second. And at frame 75, let's drag this up until all the bricks have completely assembled. There we go, and then we'll set another keyframe there. So I've got a keyframe at 0, another one at 75. At 0, my field is down here. Over those 3 seconds, it moves upwards. So if I just hit play, rewind and play, that's looking pretty good. And let's look through my camera while it does that. So that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I would like a little bit more variation in it. And at the moment, the bricks are just coming and falling straight down to assemble that. I'd quite like a bit more movement in them, maybe so they tumble as they fall. So what I'm going to do to achieve that is I'm going to add a bit of randomness to their rotation so they tumble as they land. So let's just pause that, and I'm going to drive my playhead here. I'm just going to click and drag till about halfway through so I can see what's happening with my wall here when I start to put my random effector on. And let's just jump out of the camera for a second. So I want to randomize the rotation of these so they tumble. So let's select the cloner, go to the MoGraph menu, go to Effector, and grab a random effector. And as we can see, the position of these all get jumbled up, and if I scrub through the timeline, these are all randomized in their position. So let's go to this random effector and go to its parameters. and I'll leave the random position turned on so there's a bit of variation there, but what I'm really interested in is the rotation. So if I turn that on, and I'm going to set each of these values to maybe 90 degrees, and now you can see these bricks are all rotated and jumbled up all over the place. So at the moment the random effector is just randomizing them, but we don't have any way of controlling the random rotation of those bricks yet. So what I want to do is add a field to these so that we can do the same thing that we've done with our bricks. In the plane effector, the field drives the bricks down into place. With this random effector, I want a field to turn the random on or off. Now what I can do, there's a couple of ways of doing this. One thing I can do is go to my random effector and I can do the same thing I did with my plane effector. I can go to fields, I can make a linear field, I can do it in the y-axis, and then I can drive that random effector through there. And what I'm doing basically is recreating exactly what I did with the plane effector's field. So I can do that, but I can also be really clever here. So I'm going to delete that field. We already have a field that drives through the bricks and turns an effect on or off. So what I can do is I can use this field to drive not only the plane effector but also the random effector. And to do that, it's really simple. All I need to do is go to my random effector, make sure I'm in the fields tab, and just drag and drop the field that we've already got in the plane effector into the list of fields for my random effector. So now, as we drive through here, as the field goes through, it drops the bricks into place and it turns off the random effector at the same time. So that's being a little more efficient with our fields there. We're just using the one field for both effectors. Now this generally works, but in some situations, depending on what kind of cloner you've got and what kind of situation you've got with your effectors, sometimes one field being shared between the effectors doesn't work. But in this case, because it's a pretty simple cloner that's just being assembled, this one's working just fine. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So now I've got this nice randomized tumbling of bricks falling into place, and that's looking really good. One thing, looking at this, I think my camera is actually a little bit too low. I want my brick wall a little bit higher in the shot. Now I'll probably change this later because I've got other things to add to it. But what I'm just going to do here is go into my protection tag, and I'll just delete it for a second, reposition my camera so my brick wall's a little lower, and then I'll go back to that tags menu and under rigging tags, let's turn protection back on, and now we've got our camera locked off there again. So that's looking really good. Next thing I want to do is create some color for my bricks. So let's go to the end of my sequence here. I'm just going to use the sort of bright primary, red, yellow, blue type colors for my bricks. So in my material manager, which is this little icon here, it's a circle with a little line under it. I'm going to hit the plus button here to create a new default material. I'm going to double click this and I'm going to make this red. So let's just click and drag these sliders for my colors, and I'm going to call this material red. And what I'm going to do is drag and drop this red onto my Lego brick, and now I've got red bricks. I'd quite like a whole bunch of different bricks that are different colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this brick and make several different versions that are all different colors. I'm just going to use Command C, Command V, and Command V again, and I'm going to put each of these bricks into the cloner. And now what I'm going to do with this red brick, if I hold down the Command key and drag that material down, I get a copy of it. I'm going to double click this copy, and let's make this one yellowish color. Make it a little bit darker, and this will be yellow. And I'm going to Command drag this down to copy it, double click it, and let's make this one blue and rename it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the materials on some of these bricks with these other ones. So I can just delete the materials there and put a yellow on that one and a blue on that one. And now what we've got is our cloner has got 3 bricks in it. Each one's a different color, and each clone is now alternating between these 3 different colors that I've got. So I've got this is a really simple way of making multicolored clones. Now, that looks great. It looks pretty good, but what I'd quite like is to randomize these colors so that we don't have these regular patterns, but they're just random brick colors. So maybe it's like when you're a kid and you're not worried about colors and things, you just want to build stuff and you grab any colored brick you want. So to do that, let's grab the cloner, and what we're going to do is go to the Object tab, and underneath the clones drop-down list here, rather than iterate, which means alternate through each of these clones, we're going to randomize the clones. So this will create just a complete random pattern. Now, random patterns are great. Sometimes you don't get exactly the randomness that you want. So what we have with a randomness is the seed value. The seed value is just the random number this starts with. And if we change the seed, you'll get different types of random patterns. So this can be quite useful if you do want something random, but you're not entirely happy with the randomness that you've got, and you might want to change it. Another thing that you can do with this cloner system by using multiple clones in it, you could, for example, flavor your clones so that they're mostly one color. So say, for example, I wanted mostly red and 1 or 2 yellow and blue things. All I need to do there is select the red brick and paste it a bunch of times, put all those into my cloner, and now we can see we've got mostly red with the odd bit of yellow and blue. So you can see by the way that you distribute your clone objects and the types of colors you have on them, you can manipulate your clone coloring and patterns quite easily. I'm just going to undo that and just get rid of all those extras. I'm just going to leave it as it is. So that's my brick wall pretty much made. Let's just play through that, make sure that works, and we'll look through our camera while we do that. And yep, that's all looking pretty good. Okay, now I've got some other bits to put into the scene as well. What I want to do is take all the stuff that I've made here already and kind of lock it away so that when I start to bring in the other elements, my scene doesn't get too messy. A couple of things I'm going to do. Let's just close that cloner for a second. Now I'm going to drag and drop my plane effector just underneath the cloner. I'm not making it a child, I'm just putting it in the list underneath, and I'm going to put the random effector underneath as well. So I've got the cloner, then the plane effector, then the random effector. Now this is not just keeping my scene tidy. In Cinema 4D, when you've got a number of objects and effectors and whatever else you've got in your scene, Cinema 4D actually calculates them in the object manager from the top to the bottom. So when you're dealing with multiple cloners, MoGraph objects, effectors, fields, it becomes important to stack these in the right order that they're going to happen in the actual object manager. So in this case, we've got a cloner, then it gets a plane effect applied to it, then it gets a random effector applied to it. So it's good practice to put these in order from top to bottom in this object manager. As I said, it does make a difference a little bit further down the track when you start to get into much more complex 3D scenes. So this is a good habit to get into. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to use a layer to organize these objects so that I can lock them and hide them and continue working with these out the way. So the way to do that is I want to select all of these things in here. So I can shift select that whole list. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add to new layer. And what you'll see is we now get all these objects are color coded. They've got this orange tab by them. And if we go just down to where our attribute manager is, just to the left of that, we've got a layers tab. And in here, I've now got this orangey red colored layer. And I'm going to double click that and call it brick wall. And we've got a couple of icons here. V is for visibility, so we can turn that off. L is to lock, so now you can see these are all locked. The M here, we can actually hide them from the object manager. So it's a really good way of keeping all the elements in our scene separate and organized and it's a really helpful way of managing your scene. So I've got these on a layer now. I'm actually going to lock that layer for now, and then I will continue on shortly with the next parts of this 3D scene.